that program is definitely geared towards like giving back. And it's geared towards around the idea that without trail building, there's nothing for people to ride. You know what I mean? Like many of these races and everything else are all like, that's the foundation this stuff is built upon. Like, sure, we can just go ride our bike in the woods, but then a lot of times it's not sustainable. Like some skidder downhills down the side of the hill, and sometimes they're very fun, but they only last like a year. You know what I mean? And then there's big rut, and there's not like certain areas that just don't hold up. So that's where the science and idea behind actual like calculated trail building comes into play of like making an experience and making it stay a good experience.
Welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 191, we have Lars Romig of Sedona, Arizona. Lars has been a longtime member of the Verde Valley Cyclists Coalition, along with being a trail builder and mountain bike trail access advocate. Most recently, Lars led the charge on building the Hardline Trail. This conversation is one that I have wanted to have with the Sedona Local for a handful of years now, as there is a ton of riding content that comes out of Sedona, but not a lot of content around how the trails and trail access for mountain biking came to be in Sedona. Cooley Creative is the title sponsor for this episode. They design and build custom websites, as well as help companies with branding, photography, and e-commerce. Cooley Creative was started in Wisconsin, but is now based out of Bend, Oregon. Jared from Cooley Creative is a friend of mine. We've traveled together on multiple mountain bike trips, and sometimes he sends it. For more information about Cooley Creative, head on over to www.dudejustsendit.com. Yes, that's right, www.dudejustsendit will get you to the Cooley Creative website, so check it out. Cattle Mountain Apparel, the brand that was built by travelers, hikers, trail runners, and mountain bikers, with the motto of venture far, laugh hard. While I definitely use Cattle Mountain apparel for mountain biking, Cattle Mountain is also my go-to choice for daily wear as it is super functional and comfortable. Cattle Mountain Apparel also offers a lifetime gear repair program with the goal of extending the life of their products while reducing waste in the process. If you ever damage any of your apparel, Cattle Mountain will repair it for free for life. By using the affiliate link found in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website, a small commission will come back to the Trail Effect podcast, which helps to cover the cost of expenses for keeping this show going. Now on to the Trail Effect with Lars Romig. Here we are today on Trail Effect. I have Lars Romig. Lars is a resident trail builder, trail advocate, all-around awesome mountain biker in the Sedona area. And I have not had the great fortune to have Sedona featured on this podcast yet. And when the latest specialized soil searching video came out, I took that opportunity to promptly contact Lars and figure out how we can include Sedona into the Trail Effect podcast. So how's it going today, Lars?
Pretty good. I mean, perfect weather outside, so got to get out at some point today.
Oh yeah, for sure. We're recording this in early April of 2025. It's got to be probably prime time for Sedona mountain biking before it gets too warm for the summer, right?
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, recent rains, soil moisture is still in there, so whether it's like ride or dig, it's perfect right now.
Let's get into your backstory on how you got into mountain biking. From the research that I've done, it appears that you kind of grew up in the Sedona region. Sedona, for me, has been kind of a mystery as to how it came to be from a mountain biking perspective. But let's get to how mountain biking in general captured your attention and made it an activity that you've really focused on for your life.
So, I have a long cycling history. I kind of started riding bikes as a little kid and then got into BMX, raced BMX as a younger kid, and then kind of got out of it through mid-high school. Just got into the social scene a bit. And then actually was a bit overweight towards the end of high school, like not like gluttonous, just kind of like a really thick kid, and lost a bunch of weight in the gym and hated cardio on the cardio machines and thought, you know what, I'm going to get another bicycle again. So I decided to get a bike and ride to the gym and do that stuff. And my thought was, I'm going to get a downhill bike, and I live in Jerome. which is on the other side of the valley, halfway up the mountain, like 2,000 feet above Cottonwood, where the gym was at. So I would like ride the bike out the mountain, find different ways to go down the hill. And then I would ride that bike, which was a 2001 GT DHI, and I would ride it back up the hill. Needless to say, I didn't do that many times. It was like, I eventually went from 44 tooth front chainring to a 38 tooth front chainring, and bike was like 50 pounds with a Marzocchi Monster T on it. And that's how I kind of got back into mountain biking. Had a really amazing experience the first time I went down, kind of caught a big group of antelope with the bike, and then was in the pack of the antelope going down this ridge line. They would get away from me as it kind of went uphill, and then I'd catch them again. And then once more time, just like riding in that group of these antelope. Anyways, it was just an experience that was very like kind of couldn't have been better to happen like right out of the gate. So that kind of caught me back in like, wow, this is amazing. Super fun, just ripping down the ridge lines on that mountain. And then I got into the community over here because there wasn't that many like other mountain bikers in Jerome or Clarkdale or Cottonwood. Really not a lot of opportunity. So I started coming over here and getting tied in with the Mountain Bike Heaven crew and also with the Bike and Bean crew that were there, like starting to ride. And I was a young kid. I was like 21, 22 years old at this time. And just slowly started getting sucked into these groups of like going out and riding gnarlier stuff with both of them. And that, as I did more and more of those rides, I wanted to see more and more specific experiences. And trail building back then was pretty prolific in the illegal manner. So all over there was stuff happening. Not a lot of engagement with the local land manager. Not that anybody was really trying, it just a lot of people didn't know. It was just kind of like oblivious, right, to what the whole process was. And then probably when I was like 24, 25, I started getting more and more curious about like how to get these more specific experiences. We would go and travel. I had started racing downhill races with a couple of my friends and wanted to see those experiences back home. And so really started going to the local club here, which at the time was very incipient, the Verde Valley Cyclists Coalition, and engaging them and like, hey, how do I make change to do this stuff? And that's just kind of my nature of getting involved and trying to make change. And I was just this young punk kid on a downhill bike, riding it as a trail bike basically back then, most of the time, trying to figure out how to have like a lift on the mountain, local mountain, and like crazy gnarly downhill trails, and just not really knowing all the ins and outs. And I've learned through the years all that stuff of like what's appropriate here and what works here and how to do that. But that was where it kind of like got me sucked in. And I've been on the board of the VVCC now, I think, since like 2007. And then it's just, we can go into more detail on this stuff, but it's been a long road of lots of little details of working on different committees with the city of Cottonwood, the city of Sedona, and being involved in a number of different pieces from the different trail systems at the base of Mingus and Dead Horse and over here in Sedona. Much more specifically here in Sedona now, because I've been in Sedona now for like living specifically for 15 years now or so, and just ingrained in all aspects of it now.
Before we get into some of the specifics, let's go into what you do professionally as a career and kind of what allows you to live in Sedona. Because from what I could tell, it looked like you were professionally into search and rescue and basically first responder type of work. Is that correct?
Correct. I work for the fire department here, and we do essentially a lot of search and rescue. The majority of what we do is medical. I'm a fire paramedic. My favorite part of my job is that we do get to go out to the backcountry and get people out of there from mishaps when they're hiking and stuff happening out there, and kind of be that safety net when stuff goes wrong for people. Sometimes people make poor decisions, and sometimes people have just mistakes that happen and they get busted. So it's kind of, it's a good time to get out there and be able to make their day go better. And it's a bunch of fun stuff to play with that we get to do in training for those events.
Yeah, one of the things, so my first time to Sedona was in February of 2021. I had known of Sedona from a mountain biking perspective. I had no idea Sedona was as popular as it is for general tourism.
Yeah, most of the time we're second in the state. In a couple of years, we've outbeat the Grand Canyon, but yeah, we're right there, right under the Grand Canyon with visitation for the state.
So I could imagine your role as a professional can get pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we do run a lot of, like, last year, I think we ran 217 calls outside on the trails, anywhere from just like complex stuff to broken ankle and people can't walk out to heat exhaustion and stuff like that. Just a lot of different ways people can get themselves in trouble out there. And it's, if you, that sounds like a lot, but if you think of the fact that we have 2.2 million people visiting a year, that actually 3.5 to 4 million that visit, 2.2 that use the trails, that's a pretty low incidence of mishap. 2.2 million compared to 217 people. So I would say people generally do pretty good.
Yeah. And bringing this back full circle, I'm assuming your experience with mountain biking and your love of being outside and exploring the trails really kind of led you down this path professionally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, one, being having the time to do it, being able to kind of do it as part of work. One guy specifically that we all as a group would go like hike and climb and canyoneer. When I was working at the LeBears, there's a resort up in Uptown, and my friend Dale and Mark. When my friend Dale got into the fire department and said, man, it's like fits our lifestyle perfectly, because it was never the kid that was like, oh, I want to be a fireman right now. And then as I got time spending with him and then going and riding along, like, wow, I like kind of wrote this thing off, because it wasn't like the norm, like they usually look for a little off the beaten path tracks. But once I kind of got involved in it, then it was like, it kind of pulled me right in.
So going back into trail development within Sedona, let's dig into how Sedona trails really came to be. I mean, you'd mentioned that it was a lot of illegal, and sometimes that conjures up really negative things, but we're not talking about this from a negative sense, but a lot of illegal or maybe user generated is maybe a better term.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
User generated trails, and how those user generated trails, A, like how they got built, but then B, more importantly, how they actually got adopted into the U.S. Forest Service, because it looks like most of your trails, and I'm assuming most of your trails, there might be some municipal land too, but most of your trails look to be on U.S. Forest Service land. Correct.
Yeah. There's, I mean, very, very little trail that's not on U.S. Forest Service. There's small chunks of state trust land around the area, but I mean, they're like a fraction of a percentage of the area. And then city property has some stuff, but like 99.9% of everything is on U.S. Forest Service.
What was the time frame for that all coming online from recognition within the U.S. Forest Service and like official mapping that you could actually like, show to people coming in from out of town?
So I have to recall, it's, I want to say late 2000s is when stuff, like a lot of that stuff got built in the early mid 2000s. It was more like you needed to kind of know the group and then show up, and people knew where to make a left on said trail and get on this trail. And yeah, I mean, during that time, there was also a lot of back and forth with the Forest Service closing down a lot of those trails as they were being built, and obviously trying to like catch the people that were building them. And I mean, it was a lot of bad negative press for the community in the local paper and everything. But then as we had a change in the Forest Service with the rec staff officer, I mean, she saw that like this is a need that's just not being fulfilled, and a community that wasn't engaged. And when she started outreaching to our club, I was at that point already heavily involved on the board of the Verde Valley Cyclists Coalition. I saw that attempt that of the land manager trying to outreach and trying to like, engage in the community, work with that. And it's like, I thought at the time, it's like, this is an opportunity we shouldn't turn down here right now. Like battling back and forth and trails being closed and just being like kind of the enemy is not the role that we as mountain bikers need to be in. So I tried to round at that time, I want to say it was like 08 or 09 in that area. I rounded up a whole bunch of the community, a lot of the people that were building and a lot of the just local riders, a lot of people in the club, and got them into a big meeting to just kind of discuss like, we need to engage in this and like try to move forward as a more cohesive group. And some people did, but I think the nature of a certain type of trail builder doesn't want to like work within the confines of that kind of a system. So not everybody came in, and they still to this day, there's some of those people still around that I just don't think they'll ever come into that. That's just kind of like part of the ecosystem of people, right? Yeah, it kind of happens in every user group. But anyways, it did, the majority of people did, and it started a pretty good momentum within the club, where we started to get a big planning process happening that took place in 2013. And then we started adopting a lot of that stuff around that time and bringing on Highline, Hangover, Hogs, and then built a number of other trails, planned out like quite a lot of trails that we literally just are finishing the last bit of that plan from way back when. It was a grant, the Rivers and Trails, RTP grant that we had a facilitator plan out with tons of community outreach. But so anyways, that's where a lot of those trails came on. So we have a lot of user generated trails, some new from scratch trails, and then just purely like social trails where they were walked in, ridden in, that now are incorporated in the system. And now the vast majority of what we're going towards now is coming forward is new construction and small. There's so much use here that there's user generated via use, just traffic all over. So like there's a trail we're working on currently that is probably 60% new, 40% user generated, and not illegally built in this case, but just counted in by feet and bike tires and horses.
Can you kind of explain how, like, maybe the different zones and the order of how those zones got opened up? Because when I think of Sedona, I think of the stuff down by Oak Creek, which is, you know, your Highline area kind of stuff that's south, and then you have your Hogs area or Broken Arrow area. And I'm not going to profess to be an expert on the region, but I'm right now pulling from memory. And then you go a little bit further west, and you get stuff like kind of in Sedona proper near a high school. And then you go north of that, and you got the Mezcal area.
Yep.
And all of these areas, from the outsider looking in, provide very unique, distinct user experiences. And I might have even forgotten an area or two.
Yeah, there's a couple of sub areas within those zones, and we might call them by a little bit different areas. But the like Village of Oak Creek area, which would be south, where Slim Shady and Dog Pathway leave from that area of town, which is Sedona by zip code, but it's unincorporated area of town. Those trails go north from the village. Slim Shady hits Highline. Highline takes off from there and heads towards Oak Creek, kind of heading north. But that would be the whole like village zone. And then you do get further north to what would be the Chapel area. That's kind of where I live. And that's where you have like the Broken Arrow Hogs area. And then as you go a little further north, you have the Hangover area, which is like the Munns Mountain area. Shenandoah Hill, like Shenandoah Hill Road is another popular landmark that people queue in on that. And then West Sedona with like what previously we called secret trails and now a lot of people refer to as Adobe Jack. And then further west, you have the Western Gateway area, which is like Dry Creek trails. And then where you reference Mezcal is just kind of part of the Dry Creek Basin. And that stuff out there is a little bit more palatable for most of your intermediate riders, a little more XC oriented, not as big of downhills. And not that we have big downhills, but like the Munns Wagon area with Hangover is probably like the most physically challenging and technically challenging. And then the village area has got a lot of XC stuff as well, but then it also has the more challenged stuff with Highline and now Hardline and just the whole cathedral zone.
Was there kind of an order of how that stuff got accepted? Like, was it kind of just what was the most established out of the gate?
Slim Shady was the first one, if I recall, to be adopted. And then Highline, Hogs, Hangover were adopted. And then as that stuff was happening, I mean, there's just a lot of changes to make stuff more sustainable. There was certain areas where just maybe people never took the time to either one, and I shouldn't say just sustainable, it was also like user experience. There was areas where we put in like on Hogs, we put in full rock berms in some areas to help make that user experience not just more sustainable, but also more fun.
Let's stick with Hogs.
Okay.
For just a minute. And the reason why I'm going to ask is because there's one trail over there that I found to be vastly different from a user experience than the rest of them, but very fun, and that would be Pigtail.
Yep.
What's the backstory with Pigtail?
So Pigtail was a club project that was done by the VVCC that was actually an IMBA Trail Day originally. And one of our old board members, Dave Seashon, I think was the guy that originally kind of proposed the idea. And then Leslie Kmeyer, and I'm forgetting her husband's name right now.
Chris. Yeah. Leslie and Chris came out and did that weekend out there with us. And we did a bunch of tread work and like basically they're doing their trail school thing, teaching people how to do specific pieces of that. We moved a bunch of rock for one feature and made like there's a pretty prominent diving board style drop on that trail. Did a bunch of cool rock armoring, which kind of
I guess we'd already been doing it a bit, but that one really cemented in my head, at least, like I really love doing the masonry work. And then that trail at the time was mainly just using more natural grade changes and stuff to get some of the features. But the features and jumps were very small back then. And then a friend of mine, Dean, that got in trouble at one point for trail building. Actually, I don't know if it wasn't for that. It was for other reasons that he had got in trouble with the law. And his probation was community service. And he was able to finagle into getting to do trail work for his community service. And so he went out and did a fair bit of work on Pigtail and got some of the features built up a little bit more. Still very small, but it's just like that trail has grown over time, and we just keep watering it. And I live very close to it. Like it's not even a mile to the beginning of the trail from my house. And so I go over there constantly and do work on it. And we've grown it. My kid now too has gotten very enticed into working on that one. And so we'll go out and take all the tools and wheelbarrow out there and just start growing the jumps bigger and bigger. And so that's kind of grown it to where it's at. And I mean, I worked on it a week ago.
You know, I hadn't ridden in that zone the first time I was there in 2021, but we did ride in that zone when I was just there this past January. So that area, that's considered the Broken Arrow area region of this, correct?
Correct. Or like Battlement Mesa is another name from all the old Western movies.
That brings up a good point. What is the history of Western movies in Sedona? This is a total tangent.
Yeah. So the name Broken Arrow is from an old movie that was filmed out there, and numerous others. I'm not a movie buff I can't give you the whole details on that stuff, but yeah, Sedona definitely has a pretty thick history when it comes to old movies. And that area specifically was very popular for a lot of the movie sets.
Like the Broken Arrow with, that came out in the 90s, that Broken Arrow?
I think the original one's even older than that, if I recall. 50s or 60s. But again, don't quote me on that stuff. I'm not a good historian on Sedona movie lore.
Isn't there another film set like that's kind of up in the northwest part, like over by Mezcal?
I'm sure. Yeah. Again, I mean, there's tons of the old movies were filmed all over here back in the day. I mean, there was Jeep roads all over the place as well back then, and just kind of like, a lot less management.
Yeah, I want to say I found something adjacent to like the Chuck Wagon area. There's like an old homestead or something up in that neck of the woods.
Correct. Yeah, like Earl's Cabin.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go into relationship building with the U.S. Forest Service, because that'll tie us into eventually how you were able to get Hardline built. Because if those who haven't seen the soil searching movie, which I'm going to link in the show notes on this particular build, it's a breath of fresh air in terms of how mountain bikers came together with U.S. Forest Service and I believe a local conservation corps.
A little bit with another trail crew.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Summit to Sea Trails, and then our local crew with the Forest Service. I don't think we didn't have any ACE crews on there. We do a lot of work with ACE, American Conservation Experience, and they were not involved with Hardline, but many other great projects they have been.
Yeah, let's dig into that U.S. Forest Service partnership, how we kind of got into how it was groomed initially through the Verde Valley Cyclists Coalition, but how that's continued to be an important integral role within your community.
So again, back to that meeting way back when, trying to get those people together, which we did get a lot of people like together on that, and then involved a lot more volunteer opportunities as we started to adopt some of these user created trails that are out there, and then making modifications to them to make them more fun. Because a lot of people back then had worries of like, oh, they're just going to dumb it down. They're going to do this to it, do that. And my goal back then was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to let them dumb it down. I mean, and there's a time and a place for dumbing down. We'll say that, but that was the goal, is like, let's make sure these experiences are the same or even better in some cases. So each one of those, we actually made some significant changes to some of those trails that, in my opinion, added to the user experience quite greatly. And that, I think, got more people involved. Like, it was fun to go out with a bunch of people, build trail, get some snacks, get some beers afterwards. And that has just continued to grow since then. You know what I mean? More people kind of get involved, and then they get more people jazzed up. And I mean, way back when we would have 10, 15, 20 people. And then now if we have like a busy weekend on a real popular trail, we could have 40 to 50 people show up. and then knock out a ton of great work. But so that just kept on going. That RTP process for the planning that happened in 2013, we started knocking off more and more of those trails as time went on. And we just have had more and more people get involved with the club. And then as of recently, I feel like we've just got even more motivated people, and it just kind of seems to be exponentially growing. The club back then was like between 60 to 80 people routinely, and now we're 325 members.
Oh, that's incredible. And that's, just to be kind of put that into perspective, Sedona or the Verde Valley isn't like a huge metropolis.
No. I want to say there's like all towns included, like Sedona, Cottonwood, Clarkdale, Camp Verde, Cornville, Rimrock. There's like 70,000, but Sedona itself is 10,000 city limits, and like another like 7,000 in the unincorporated areas. So yeah, and the majority of those 325 are in the Sedona area.
Aside from access, what do you kind of attribute to that growth to?
Just the community itself of people going out having fun riding, and then more of the building and getting involved in like being connected to the trails. It's just, you've built plenty of trail yourself, like it's that connection to the land. And once you build that section or do maintenance or do something that changes that feel, whether you're biking or even hiking on it, you go past it, like it gives you that connection to that piece. And it's just really rewarding because you're constantly like out there enjoying the outdoors. At least I am. And I know a lot of people here are. And so I think that is very contagious to people to get out there and do it. And so it's just become a habit now. Every year we do a schedule of all the different trail days we're going to do for spring and fall. So our build seasons are that. You usually start building in like the late September, the October area, and we'll build all the way into the holidays. And then we have a whole new schedule that starts in the beginning of January and goes all the way through to where we're getting close to finishing up currently right now. By May, we'll be kind of taking a break through the summertime. It just gets so hot. We'll do some stuff in the summertime, but it's not like no big volunteer events. I
was just going to ask if you had a regular, consistent, reoccurring schedule, because I think that's one piece that helps continue to grow engagement is that predictability of when something might happen.
Yep. Yeah. And ours is super scheduled out. We're usually like all of our public volunteer days are either Thursday or Saturday. Every once in a while it's Sunday, stuff like based on scheduling, but those are the two really like consistent days. And then we'll have some specific longer days where people are out for the majority of the day to knock a project out until it's done. And we usually do those days on Fridays. But yeah, we'll have that whole schedule posted on VVCC's website. Doing good work is also what kind of brings people back at it. And as of late, the work with Kevin Cool, our current trails guy, and our previous trails guy, Forrest Seville, and those two guys, we've had a couple others that were really good, but those two guys have really been paramount in like growing.
I happened to catch a pin flag or two out of the corner of my eye when I was riding the original single track bypass. That's one of the trails one of the newer trails you guys have worked on, I'm assuming?
Yeah, that one's done and like dialed in and running really good. It definitely adds to that experience. You can take it all the way to the Bell Rock Vista trailhead now, which adds like a little over another half mile of descending from the high point next to Bell Rock. And it allows riders to kind of get off of that larger pathway that's got a majority of the foot traffic on there. People just kind of going the sheer numbers of people that go up to Bell Rock. So it's a good way to avert user conflict and then also give people a really good bike experience.
Let's dig into Hardline.
Yeah.
First, the purpose and need, or what captured your attention to move forward with that specific trail off of Highline, just to be clear, because I think I know when I was looking at some of the comments, I think some people thought Hardline was Highline that weren't really familiar with the region. Yep. But it's actually off of Highline, and it provides, from what I can tell, an alternative descent.
Correct. The naming convention on that was kind of that. You listen to people like ride Sedona, and it's like, oh, you mean the Hogs area? Like I rode high on the Hog Heaven to Hogwash. And so the Highline thing was like I rode Highline to Hardline. And the need for Hardline was that we've been building a lot of trail since that RTPP process. Only a few trails here and there. We did some like harder ones, but nothing that was like as grand as Highline, Hangover, Hogs. We did Thunder Mountain Trail, which was good, like really technical, a lot of rock features, but it just never had that there's not like a big descent in it. And the recipe for Highline, Hogs, and Hangover is there's like some pretty cool artistic trail routing on those trails. And then they have like almost like a grand finale at the end of them. They have like kind of crux features or a larger descent, especially with like Highline and Hangover. You have all this work to get up there, a lot of cool features, and then you kind of get towards the point, and then you have a pretty good descent on both of them. Hogs, you can take part of Hogs into Pigtail, and that's kind of how it finishes into Pigtail if you take it that way. So back to Hardline, I wanted something to the community to have to be like, hey, like the Forest Service we are winning, because I still had people that were like a little bit naysaying. The majority of people understood we were winning and like progressing, but I really wanted to like give back to the higher end community because it's easy to build a ton of intermediate trail. And so I really want to try to address both ends of the spectrum. You mentioned Seal Track Bypass. That was like a really good, fun, green trail. And then I wanted something for people on the higher end of the spectrum to be able to challenge themselves and see something come to fruition from the Forest Service the right way. That was like, on level with Highline and Hangover and Hogs, and maybe even a notch above. So that was the idea came from, and the literal idea came from just me out exploring on foot, because I spent a ton of time hiking as well. Found that zone, and then we rode out that Slick Rock area where it's at with a friend of mine in 2016, and kind of looked at it. I'm like, we could ride this as is, more of just like a line. Not thinking trail stuff. Then it was like, it could also, you could build a trail through this that's like doable by most expert riders. And so that just at the time is right around the time I got pulled into the soul searching program with Specialized. I kind of got connected through, Tyson Swayze and Moab. The guy, Fani, that started the soul searching program, got put in touch with Tyson to find out about Moab stuff with like Captain Ahab and a lot of their building with Moab Trail Mix. Tyson told Fani he should come ride with me down here. That's how I got connected into the soul searching program and been with them ever since. But anyways, that really did motivate me, like, hey, if like need to keep this going and think of ideas to do this. And that was when I first put the proposal for that trail in 2017. I brought that over to Forest Seville at the time here, and then also pushed it up and started looking for support from Specialized back then. And then it just took time to really keep pushing that proposal of what the idea was to the Forest Service. And I think that at the time we had really good people in the Forest Service, but I don't think they could get all of the different staff officers sold off on the idea going forward to be an actual project. So I just, kept on it, like kept on moving with other projects and helping them out with everything I could, and like nurturing the relationship and just trying to make successes in every other trail project we could. And then we had some changeover in staff on that. And then I just kept on pushing that, hey, like we do need to address all ends of the spectrum here and try to give the higher level riders something new, and also give the beginner riders something good, because that just you gotta feed the whole ecosystem. And Kevin Cool was our trails guy now for the last 4 years, and he saw the same need that I did and kind of understood it, and was able to like bring it up to a lot of the staff at the Forest Service, and we included it into the Red Rock Trails and Access Plan, the phase 1, and that's kind of how it came to fruition. It was like he was paramount in getting behind that with us and getting that into that piece, and then now it's done.
So approximately when was it greenlit in terms of actual construction? Because you mentioned Slick Rock. If you watch the video, you'll notice there's a lot of other integral points that had to get constructed to connect all of it together that were not easy to do.
Correct. Yeah. So there was a lot of give me, and there was a lot of really hard work. So in comparison, it was like compared to building a dirt trail where it's like all construction through an area. This was like using the trails, the natural slick rock areas, to just make a route and just simply paint white marks on the rock as like, hey, here's where to go. But then we had a couple sections coming across one gully that was a ton of work, very unstable and very like disconnected. Hike a bike only. There was nobody with any skill set could ride through it. And then it was back to easy slick rock again for a ways. And then it was into the section that we rode at the time, super high level. But that was where, with a little bit of manipulation and rock shaping and masonry work, we opened that up and then added in a bunch of heavy rock armoring. And that's where Forrest and Tommy from Summit to Sea Trails, they actually donated a week of their time to do that construction. When it was actually greenlit, it was actually that section of the Red Rock Trails and Access Plan that was, I want to say, it was greenlit in like October, November of 2024 is when it was actually signed off by the district ranger.
To build?
Correct.
That's not even a year ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it went out to public comment for the Red Rock Trails and Access Plan like the year before. There was some delay in that stuff and some stuff that had to be redone. And yeah, it would be the beginning of 2024, but it was put into that in the pipeline in 2023. So yeah, I mean, the construction part on most trails for us like that, once it's greenlit and it gets put on the program of work, it's not super hard to build them with as many people as we have now. It's just, honestly, there's more work of getting it to that point beforehand.
You just jogged my brain. It was funny. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago. We had some trail building happening where I live here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. There was the thought of the building part being the more difficult part of the process. And I'm like, oh man, this is like the easiest part.
Yeah.
Everything that led up to this, that causes all the, what I'm going to say, brain damage. While it might not be physically demanding, it is definitely not easy.
Yeah, but it's where, in my opinion, it takes the most discipline, because it's not stuff that's like, there's no glamour to it. There's no like, you don't get to go out there and dig in the dirt and get a product from digging in the dirt, or, I mean, in this case, chiseling in the rock. You simply have to go out there and nurture the relationships, show up at meetings, write emails, write letters, like try to get people behind it. And that's the part, like, there is some reward in that, but it's very different than actually going out there and physically doing it. Oh yeah, it just takes discipline to stay on that stuff. You know what I mean? Because there's just not a lot of immediate reward in the moment of it compared to just physically building.
And an extreme amount of patience.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned public comment period. There's a lot of the guests on this show and even listeners of this show may not be in an area with U.S. Forest Service land. They might be in an area with local municipal land or state forest land or county land. What does that comment period look like from your perspective, and what role does that play in the process, just to kind of bring people up to speed with what that actually is?
So it's in regards to the NEPA process. And so the Forest Service, depending on when they have what's called a proposed action, they have to do a certain amount of analysis to make sure that there's not impacts to, hydrology, soils, biology, archaeology. So it kind of has to go through this process of looking at that, and it has to go out to the public for what that proposed action is, to make sure that there's like not any conflict with the local community of what people think about it. And it's not just the local community. Like you could comment on this project here because it's public land, right? It's national public land. So they have to put that out for the public to like see what this proposed action is. And then once they can comment on it, then it has to go through and they have to look at all those comments and try to mitigate the concerns that are in there, communicate back to those people, and see if they're like valid concerns that really need to be mitigated. And so that's a process. You know what I mean? Like, and there was in the original Red Rock Trails and Access Plan, there was some concerns brought by the equestrian group about simply some areas in Tree Creek, which is part of the same proposal, that they were kind of getting like pushed out of those areas based on like steep slick rock and some other areas in there. But it was simply oversight of some of the planning that didn't recognize that they had actually had legacy use of equestrian in that zone. And so they went back and they addressed those concerns from the equestrian community. And we even, like, as the cycling club, supported the equestrians, like, in what they were looking there. Like, hey, like, we have ridden out there forever and seen the equestrian use out there. This does need to be changed on this piece right here. So that's an example of how that public process works, to make sure that people don't get like squeezed out of areas or lose their experience on national public land, right? And so it's a cumbersome process, but in the end, it's best for everybody, because it's all of our land, right? And that's like where we value being able to go outside and kind of, decompress and get out there and enjoy nature. And whether that's like zipping down single track or just sitting up somewhere high and getting away from it and contemplating that, or riding your horse through stuff and just kind of having like all those different experiences.
In Highline in particular, I believe it's a directional bike optimized or bike has the right of way trail, correct?
Correct. It's a recommended direction. We can't officially like close trails to one way, but we do recommend, like on the maps, we have them pointing in a certain direction, mainly for user experience and also to try to help avert user conflict. And we do have a number of trails now that you'll see like on Highline or Hardline, Hogs, Pigtail, Hangover. We have signs made that say bike optimized trail, caution bike optimized trail, yield to bikes. And that's simply because some of Sedona's trails are steep enough grades on the rock that you physically can't yield in some places. And the normal yield triangle, we were having problems with people like holding their ground in some cases. And I want to also say we don't have big problems with user conflict, but I could see that coming in. So we had those signs put up just so that people know that like, hey, they may not be able to yield. So it's better. The hiker is a little more agile to get out of the way rather than when on a bicycle, you're coming down something that's 25% grade and you can't exactly stop. Once you get out of that grade section down to like mellower grades, you have enough traction to stop on that stuff. So that's kind of where that came from. And those trails are also the Forest Service here with ours, and a lot of places are starting to do designed use. Like they're not closing to the trails to hike or equestrian specifically, but they will in their management file for that trail, they'll say, this is designed use bike, or this is designed use hike, or this is designed use equestrian, or multi, where it's got different kind of specs, what they're going for.
Did you ever see that stuff as becoming a reality when you were first getting into this? Because that's a pretty far departure from the beginning, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought about it way back when, but I didn't know how much it would actually happen. And then as we started like getting more and more use in some of these trails, I had suggested it to our last trails guy at one point. And I think it's slowly over time become more understand that does make sense. And I don't think it needs to really grow to everywhere else, but in those specific areas, it allows people to have a little bit more specific experience rather than with the regular yield triangle and the idea of building every trail to meet the needs of every single user specific, like as a whole, you kind of end up with a diluted trail that doesn't really address anyone's use very well. So that's where the designed use thing is definitely getting better user experiences for each one of the users. And when we have a large enough system like ours, you can also kind of get a little more concentrated use in different areas, which helps with user conflict. And then also helps with the specific user experience those users are looking for.
So you've now said user experience a whole bunch of times, and I use that phrase professionally a lot. And I think as a person that's traveled to a bunch of different communities, having that recommended direction is critical for someone that doesn't know the trail system, how a local would ride it, right?
Yep.
How have you seen success in that relative to the stuff in Sedona? I could put together routes on my own when I was there and not rely on local knowledge due to some trail forks and other stuff, right?
Yep. Yeah, so it's come a long way. I mean, way back, we had very little signage. Jennifer Burns really pushed that. She was the recreation staff officer back when the RTP stuff was happening. And she really got a lot of that rolling. We helped with a lot of signs and putting ratings. Like we didn't have any of that stuff back then. So more and more of that. And now with the like bike optimized stuff, that's helping. And I would even like to see a little bit further, like some of these like signature rides. Like there's very specific ways people like to ride Highline and like to ride Hogs. And then you've probably heard of the Triple H. Thought about trying to mark some of those rides out in a manner that's easier, just to kind of like come to an intersection and see like that specific route marked by a little marker so that you really don't have to, because it's, I mean, even with trail forks, that helps a bunch, but you're probably stopping at that intersection and like, okay, this is the way I go right here. Whereas if we had something that you could see without really having to stop, you can just flow right through. That kind of adds to the experience too. So that's something that I've wanted to implement as well.
Getting back to Highline, since it's opened, there's been, again, a lot of user-generated content in terms of, you know, obviously just recently had the Sedona Bike Fest.
Yeah. And you're talking about Hardline again, not Highline.
I'm sorry. Yes, Hardline. Like, we're going back to we're going back to Hardline. Like since it's opened, a lot of content has come out on YouTube. How has the reception been like boots on the ground and stuff that you've seen from the people that have been riding it. I'm assuming it's really good, but it'd be good to hear your take on that.
Yeah, really, really good. I mean, I get it from all angles here right now. I get it from like the community is great. I mean, work is mostly great. Work kind of razzes me a little bit about it, more in a playful manner. And then the local community in general. I mean, I've actually got a lot of outreach from some of the other local nonprofits and people just really happy about not just the trail itself, but like the whole story along with the movie. I've just highlighting the community piece and to get people motivated for doing more of that community engagement.
I've said it on this podcast a bunch, but the way Specialized has done their soil searching initiative, I think is an extremely good example of how a bike manufacturer can give back to the trail community in a not so in your face way.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts on that and how that process went on your end? Obviously you're part of the production of the movie, but like I even see it when, so like Specialized came out with the latest version of the stump jumper, right? And when they came out, the latest version of the stump jumper, if you were keyed into what was happening in the backstory of the video, you saw soil searching logos all over the place. Like that's the stuff I catch on. I don't know if a lot of other people catch that stuff, but I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that program is definitely geared towards like giving back, and it's geared towards around the idea that without trail building, there's nothing for people to ride. You know what I mean? Like many of these races and everything else are all like, that's the foundation this stuff is built upon. Like, sure, we can just go ride our bike in the woods, but then a lot of times it's not sustainable. Like some skidder downhills down the side of the hill, and sometimes they're very fun, but they only last like a year. You know what I mean? And then there's big rut, and there's not like certain areas that just don't hold up. So that's where the science and idea behind actual like calculated trail building comes into play of like making an experience and making it stay a good experience. So them supporting that, I think is really cool. I know there's a little bit of stuff with that program right now that I'm kind of hoping to see like grow again. And I would love to see more bike brands take that on too. I mean, just because it's like their whole idea, their hope was to eventually grow it to where trail builders were paid and sponsored just like pro riders. That was the end goal, to see like that into the industry kind of support that back in it's the same manner.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've highlighted a handful of different companies that do support trail building because it is getting more traction within the trail industry.
Yep.
But, and a lot of it's from a funding perspective. Some of it you don't even hear about. Some of it you only know about if you're in the know, with the local trail org and where the funding came from. But I do think that the spin that Specialized does with this one specifically really they do it so tastefully that I just think other companies could really take note to help raise the whole trail community up, right?
Yep. Well, and everybody, not just the trail community, it's the whole community, right? Like everybody gets to go out and indulge in those fruits, like whether they even know where the trail came from or not. There still are like some people may not know at all, and then the people that know, like it's motivating and like inspiring to try to see more of it for a lot of people.
Let's dig into the letter H. Now, I think it's probably pretty well known for anyone that's paid attention to Sedona that if you're riding a trail that starts with the letter H, it's one of the kind of the signature hallmark trails within the community. Was that purposeful, or did that kind of just organically grow and continue to go as the way it is today?
I'd have to ask some of the really old school guys if there was any calculation to the H, but I think it was almost organic. Like Hogs was the first one that was built out of the three. And then, I mean, Highline makes sense almost geographically of where it's at. And then Hangover just happens to be called Hangover for a number of reasons. Like when you're on that trail, you're hanging over the edge, like very up there. And the trail, the rock features itself, like hang over you as well. I could be corrected by some of the older school guys out there, but my take is it was organic.
So as a local, if you're going to come to ride, what are some of the trails that don't start with the letter H that maybe should be on someone's short list that don't get as much attention?
Thunder Mountain is really good. That one's got some really amazing masonry work on it. It was purposely made kind of janky. It's very punchy, but kind of cool, really cool trail building, and just really cool. Like the views are really good. Just, you got to be up for your bike ride. Kind of feels like a CrossFit workout on that one.
I think that could be characterized with a lot of Sedona.
Well, that one more so than others. Yeah, you're correct. Ground control is another really good one. Mescal is one that people should be like going for. Bottom out is another really interesting one that's like not as many people get to see, but it's like very creative and also very challenging. Brewer is just another one of my like, it's hard to like loop it into anything because it kind of sits on its own in the neighborhood, but it's like one of my favorite little descents. Like if I'm going to make changes to my bike or like tweak anything, it's one that I'll go benchmark on.
So one of the trails I didn't get to ride, maybe you can provide some insight on it, is up in the Mezcal area, but it's Canyon of Fools.
Canyon of Fools, yes. Yeah, and Canyon of Fools is great. One of our problems, we have a lot of trails, and I'm even like skipping over some as we're talking here. That one is definitely one that should be on people's list. It's like a little dirt slot canyon, and we've done a lot of work on that one. It was naturally rideable from the get-go, but like we've installed like little hips and jumps and stuff all along the sides of it. And then the nature of the little canyon itself, you can wall ride up onto the walls of it in a lot of spots. So that one's been super fun to kind of play with. And we've also joked that in terms of some of the work we've tried, we're fools in the canyon trying to like deal with the hydrology issues that come with putting a trail inside of a dirt slot canyon.
What have you learned from that one?
Certain things that we just don't try to do. Like we tried armoring in there at one point to like stabilize a section that I had a ride where I came through post monsoon season, and the dirt had cut so much deeper from like recent flash floods that when I came around the corner, the canyon's narrow enough that it had gone deep enough that my bars hit both sides of the canyon wall, and it like lifted the bike up, ejected me over the bike. And I thought, well, I could like, maybe we can make like an armoring pan in the bottom of it. And so we armored a section in there, like probably 2 foot wide, and then even like turn the armoring up the sides of the canyon to like contain the water so that it didn't go around it. But it proceeded to just like flash again pretty big, and then just gutted the dirt around even at the top of our thing. And then it was just like, it was gutting the dirt from underneath them, even though it was totally covered in rock. And then the rock just started shifting and moving. So it was like, you know what, we're better off just like, this one is more of a maintainable trail than a sustainable trail. And so we would just go in when that kind of stuff would happen, go in and just kind of manipulate the dirt a little bit to make sure there wasn't any hazards from that. But if it's post monsoon season, I'm pretty timid going down that thing because of that event.
What is monsoon season in terms of like and I say that from a traveler's perspective.
Yeah. So monsoon season for us typically starts like late June sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't start until early July, but then we just start getting those thunderheads that build early afternoon. You start seeing them, and then like mid to late afternoon, you'll get these thunderheads just dump, and you might just have like half inch, or I mean, we've seen 3 inches of rainfall in a very specific area in half an hour. And so you can imagine you dump that much rain in a very short amount of time like that, it makes for like pretty wild trail damage when that amount of water comes ripping down stuff.
Your soils I believe, are fairly expansive there and pretty erosive. What is the preferred trail etiquette in terms of weather events for Sedona for someone that was coming in?
So definitely we have a wide variety of like sandy to some clay type soils. If it's really, really heavy, I mean, don't like if you're making a depression in the soil, it's not worth going out there. I mean, it's going to put depressions and drains and stuff like that. And then water's going to, instead of using the drains that we install to get water off the trail, it'll stay on the trail. Just give it a little bit of time. Luckily, that time of year, that's usually pretty quick. Like the monsoons do most of their damage right there. And then a little bit of sunshine, everything, and that soil, that water gets soaked in real quick. The most time we have like unrideable conditions are more in winter, where we have snow, and then you have really saturated soils post snow, and then freeze thaw. And so you'll have like really, really sloppy riding conditions. And that's the biggest thing. We don't get like frozen ruts in the soil like some areas. We'll have some areas that can kind of do that with the clay. But in my opinion, the bigger damage that happens is when there's drains. You'll have small grade reversals and nicks and stuff like that, that when those softer conditions, it puts depressions in those, and then they no longer function. And then we end up getting rutting and water not getting off the trail anymore.
You have to deal with that from a trail volunteer perspective quite a bit.
For sure. Yeah. And then so we have a map thing we use with CalTopo that we have a number of us that go out And as we ride, if we run into significant drainage issues or just general trail problems, that's where we record that stuff for either us to go back or the Forest Service trail crew to be able to identify and prioritize what stuff needs to get fixed.
You just said something. Forest Service trail crew. How much of a partnership is there with that from a labor perspective? Because that's not something that's been brought up ever on the show.
Yeah, so they had 18 members on that crew. They have like a North crew, a South crew, and a Wilderness crew. And that has grown over the years as well with the need between how much trail we have and the Forest Service and funding. The Sedona Red Rock Trail Fund is like our main funding source. And they're a nonprofit organization that solely focuses on funding. They help fund a lot of that money to the Forest Service to help pay some of those crews. And this year specifically, with a lot of the changes with the Fed this year and losing a lot of the seasonal crews, and then also some of the stuff that's happened with Doge, we've had to fund a lot of those people through alternative funding methods. And so we had, I think it was 12 of them were employed through a nonprofit this year. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole crew, and that's a whole process of getting that crew out there to do a lot of this work and then keep them trained up and like knowledgeable about executing stuff that's works for bike specific stuff, or not, I shouldn't say bike specific, but for bike use.
You just brought up the Red Rock Trail Fund.
Sedona Red Rock Trail Fund, yeah.
Yeah. So that's separate from the Verde Cyclists Coalition.
Correct.
Just to kind of paint a picture for all the listeners, like so you got the Verde Cyclists Coalition, U.S. Forest Service, obviously municipal communities, and then the Sedona Red Rock Trail Fund. Like, how do all those interact? Just to kind of paint a picture of how maybe this kind of setup could work in other communities that are looking to fund trail construction and maintenance.
Yeah. So the funding, the Sedona Red Rock Trail Fund was born from a number of people, including some old Forest Service staff, to try to find better funding sources other than what the Forest Service gets, because it's their funding sources aren't easily adjustable to areas like Sedona where there's a really heavy demand, and the local community has a heavy demand for the trail use as well. So this nonprofit was put together as like a non-specific group. Like, it's not bike specific, it's not hike specific, it's not horse specific. It's just non-motorized trails is what they're focused on fundraising for. And they don't even advocate. And so the good part of that is like it becomes, there's just no connotation attached to it as to what it is. So all the different businesses and stuff that want to get involved can give and know that it's simply just going to help the Forest Service execute on their trails projects in the local area here. And they've been hugely beneficial. I mean, I think when they first started, they only fundraised like 14,000, and now we're in the like $500,000 a year type thing.
Dang.
And I would say growing even more. Like, I was just at one of their board meetings, and I think they need to keep up with the demand of what's coming with RTAP and then subsequent planning process past that. We're probably going to need to grow it to like $750,000.
Is that something you saw ever being a thing when you first started on this journey?
No, I mean, yes, and I guess yes and no. Like, I went to Steamboat, Colorado, and Steamboat's got a bed tax that they put a lot of that money towards, and they were putting like $600,000 a year towards their trails. And so once I've seen that in a couple areas that really do it, that became kind of a goal of mine too, is to like make sure that we are getting more and more of that. And it's turned into, for me, a pursuit of getting our city to hire a full-time trails person, which is surprising to me, maybe surprising to you too, that the city doesn't employ like a dedicated trails person. The city doesn't have a ton of their own open space in comparison to the Forest Service, but over the hill from us in Prescott, a good friend of mine is the trails person for Prescott, which Prescott has a little bit more open land, but the majority of their work is working with the Forest Service, the Prescott National Forest over there. So that's been a big pursuit for me, is like trying to get just more capacity, whether it's money, time, staff, pointed at these problems, because it's literally is the lifeblood of Sedona. Like, everybody here, whether they're here, living here, visiting here, artists, all of it, like, it's all inspired by being outside, and trails are literally the way we get out there and interact with it. No matter what we do, whether for us, most of us all biking, but everyone here uses them.
I mean, again, like when I first rolled into Sedona, I had only known it for trails.
Yep.
All the vortex stuff, the healing, all the different things that come with Sedona, like, were not on my radar at all.
And they're all based on trails though too.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, whether you're going out doing yoga, they're like hiking out to go do yoga at some of these slick rock areas on the trails to get out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, it's such a unique place. Yeah. So with that, one of the questions that I ask almost all of my listeners, and this is something I do want you to answer completely selfishly. What are some of the things that you look for in a trail community? I'm going to ask this a way that I don't always ask it, but sometimes have, which is if you had to move, say Sedona was not your place anymore, you just, for whatever reason, couldn't be there anymore. What are the things that you would look for if you could go anywhere else to make that a community you'd be wanting to move to?
I mean, the trails piece, period. Like, one, the community's got to have good trails, and then it has to have a community around the trails, just because it's like that growth of like making sure that those experiences like don't degrade, or in some cases get enhanced. You know what I mean? Because that's, for me, one of the funnest parts is like you ride a section of trail, and then you like, man, I wish that felt like a little bit more like this, and then you go fix that, and then same thing. You can see that other communities where there's people passionate about that, and you ride in those areas. It's obvious somebody is like fine tuning details like that.
Is there any certain, I mean, I guess anybody that watches soil searching and knows Hardline and Highline and all the rest of the H's, is there like, what do you look for in trails in terms of like the things that really excite you from a user experience perspective?
Just like creative line choice, like creative routing. And that's maybe due to just Sedona here. There's so much like rock topography that you have a lot of soil, and you can route stuff through the soil and make like more cool shapes and stuff, and like circuitous like alignment. But then you also get to incorporate into these areas of rock where you can make some cool line that uses the rock as a turn or roll. And that's, for me, that's like, I spend a ton of time hiking too. And we'll all go out and hike and scramble and get up on top of stuff. And on the way out there, it's always like, oh, look at that. That would be super fun to ride on that. And then I started thinking like, well, how can we put a trail to that? And does it work? Is it like make sense? Does it make a connectivity sense? And is there like other stuff that can incorporate into it? And that's just, I can't not look at stuff here and not think that.
Yeah, you have a really amazing canvas when it comes to that compared to most other regions.
Yeah. And that would be another thing I'd have to look for if I had to jump ship here. I'd have to find somewhere that also has like rad terrain,
a very unique canvas.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask earlier on the routing of things, and this is again from the outsider coming in, like what are some visual cues? I know you guys have painted white lines on things, but like what are some of the visual cues that can help people navigate through different trails? I think there's also, it looks like worn tires in certain places, but I don't actually think that's what it is, where you can kind of follow a line.
Yeah, so we've used, and I think we're going to use a little bit of it again, even on Hardline, after watching a lot of videos, is we've used concrete stain, and we stain it like a very dark color to make it look like bike tracks. It's just like, it encourages people to go exactly where you want them to go. And the reason I say that with Hardline is I watch a lot of POV footage, and we painted the white lines like right where you want to put your tire. But I see countless people going to the right of the white line and hugging the wall. And I've seen a lot of people in those videos get really lucky and like bump the right handlebar on the wall, which is not where you want to bump the handlebar. You like, that's not where you want to go off. But yeah, I watched, they're going like a full foot to the right of where the white dot is. So I think if I go in there and paint that with a little bit of the stain, that'll give people more confidence. Like, that's where my tires go. Where the white dot, there's not as much trust that, like, you mean, people follow tracks. Like, it's when they see tracks, it's like encouraging to them that that's where everybody else went.
Yeah, that's a good point that I didn't ask, is like, what have you learned since the opening of this, as far as like watching other people's footage? You kind of just brought that to light, but when it comes to like building new stuff, like how do you incorporate some of the stuff you see from existing new trails that you can maybe are an evolution, right?
Well, that's a big balance of like, as an expert rider myself, like looking at what I want to ride, and then building a trail and trying to imagine how everybody else will ride it. Those don't always line up. You know what I mean? And I've thought that with maintenance and other trail projects over the years of like, I'll build a certain way here and then imagine everybody's going to ride it this way. And then nobody rides it that way except for me. So you have to like be real yourself. And then you just constantly, when you're out working, you look at where people are going and trying to look at like, where is the mass rider going to stick their tires? And where can I put like a line for like the 5% type riders? So yeah, it's a balance of like doing that. And then the other really big balance too is like we see it with Highline Hangover Hogs, and now of course with Hardline, I knew I would expect it. Like people are ambitious. You know what I mean? They want to go conquer the hard stuff. So that's why we definitely did as much as we could of like making it marked well, and then also having that scroll catcher feature. But yeah, I mean, watching the videos too, I've definitely watched people that almost blindly send it down the scroll catcher. Like, ooh, you're in for a surprise once you get to the next piece.
How much more difficult is Hardline than some of the most difficult sections of, say, Highline, which is, and I'm using Highline as the base because it is the adjacent trail or the alternate of what you'd ride if you didn't go down Hardline.
It's an interesting answer to that one. I'd say it's hard. I mean, Hardline's harder, but once you get familiar with Hardline, it's not as hard, in my opinion. If you're riding it fast, like Highline is like loot can be loose and chunky and awkward in spots like that, where Hardline is very exposed and very much a head game. Once you've ridden the like crux move on Hardline, it becomes like, oh, that's really not that bad. Like it's not smashy. It's not like overly like going to lose it unless you're on the brakes. If you're on the brakes too much, it can be terrifying. But once you kind of like flow through it, it's actually really quite mundane. And then the hardest part of that trail is the left after the crux. And it's just kind of awkward to make that tight corner and get set up for it correctly. And then after that, it's all brake modulation. So I guess that's harder. You have to definitely have your like good braking, being able to bias your front and rear brakes and have control on steep. That's harder than Highline for sure. If you don't have that down, you're going to have a hard go with Hardline. But I find myself now, because I live right here, and then the physical effort after riding Hardline compared to Highline is much less physical effort afterwards. So I find myself riding Hardline more times than not because I don't have to go back up Templeton.
That was actually going to be my next question to close out the Hardline conversation is the routing. I'm looking at it, Trail Forks map right here, and a monitor next to me, and it goes right into Templeton and easy breezy. It looks like. Is that? I think that's right. What is the preferred complete loop that you would send riders on? Would you go right onto Templeton, or would you stay on, or would you go kind of continue straight onto easy breezy?
You would stay on easy breezy. That was the intent. Like I even proposed renaming that part of easy breezy Hardline.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Because the experience just kind of continues. It's the same exact slick rock wash. And it just, while that happens, is it continues to stay slick rock. The grade just gets a little bit less, but the speeds remain really high. Like you're still like going down the gut of that slick rock wash. So every time I ride it, I'm not stopping. Like you have good sight lines as you approach Templeton, and you can see if there's people. There's obvious if there is, and you need to check up. But if it's not, I'm just staying right on it, right into easy breezy.
That area could have a fairly high volume of hikers, if I'm not mistaken, too, right? On Templeton.
You're right next to Cathedral. Cathedral has a massive volume of them. But generally, it's not, like I would say 9 times out of 10, there's not congestion at that intersection of Hardline, Templeton, and easy breezy. And you can just keep on flowing right into easy breezy. So that's the best part of that trail is like flowing down the gully of Hardline through the crux, down into all the wall ride stuff in the bottom of it, and then just ripping right into easy breezy. And that you get, if you're looking at that as a descent from the top up on Cathedral, you're getting closer to like 450, 500 feet of elevation loss, which if you just go into Templeton, you're kind of cutting yourself short.
Yeah. And I'm only asking that just because I'm looking at it from a mapping and routing perspective. You know, I kind of wish I would have known Hardline was being built when I was there in January, because I would have loved to have taken a look at it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were mostly done in January. There was like small details left on it in there. A lot of that filming was done in December with Specialized.
Oh, wow.
And then I guess to answer your full question, like my favorite ride to have people go do is like, if you leave from Little Horse, you can do Highline, Hardline, back up to Chicken Point, and then you can do High on the Hog, Hog Heaven, Hogwash, Pigtail, and then back out again. And that gets you like essentially 3 H's in that ride, Highline, Hardline, Hogs. And I think it only comes out to like 13, 14 miles from the Little Horse Trailhead.
13, 14 CrossFit miles.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I should give the caveat that Sedona miles, even though it sounds like not much, that feels like double for most people.
Yeah, no. And, Little Horse is actually a trail that I rode a couple times when I was there in January. And I had not been on that before, but I actually really liked it a lot.
It is. It's very CrossFit-y too.
Yeah.
Going down, it's like the only hard part of going down it is it's a very popular hiking trail. So if it's a busy weekend, it's really not doing that trail justice. The only time that trail does anybody justice for descending is like early morning on a cold morning.
Yeah. When we were there, it was mid-January. We went down at midweek. I don't think it was more than 52 degrees. And so I don't think we came into any hikers the second time we went down it at all.
Yeah, that's a fantastic ride, I think.
And the first time we went down it, we only went down the lower part because we rode llama to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That upper part is great too.
Again, I had an ulterior motive when we went to Sedona, which ultimately was realized. This last trip, which I had mentioned to you, and those who know me closely know what that ulterior motive was. It does have to do with Highline, not Hardline, and it all worked out really good. But man, that was to kind of paint the complete picture. That I brought my fiance to Sedona. She's only been mountain biking for, I think this is going into her 3rd season. Hadn't ridden a bike for decades before she met me. And so in order for her to enjoy Sedona, I kind of wanted to ease her into it. We were staying in that Oak Creek area. And so we kind of rode the Oak Creek area the first day just to kind of get our feet wet. And then I took her to Mezcal, as you had mentioned, rode stuff around Mezcal. And then the 3rd day we went to Highline. And after Highline, we went over to the Broken Arrow area, or the Hogs. Yeah. And that's when stuff got pretty spicy.
Yeah, turn the volume up a little bit.
Yeah. But it was everything that, she was beside herself, grinning ear to ear, because one, she'd never mountain biked in a place she'd never even been in a place like Sedona before, to see the natural beauty of what that place provides.
Yep.
But the majority of her mountain biking was largely contained to where we live, which is the upper Midwest. A lot more not user-generated trail, like purpose-built mountain bike trail, and a lot different landscape, right? Not nearly as ledgy, a lot more rolly. And she fully understood that this is going to be way above her pay grade in a lot of places. And she was patient, and I was patient with her, and she enjoyed all of it.
You're going to be humbled a little bit here, but it's also at the same time, the beauty is like, if you have the right mindset for it, that's like, yeah, it's hard to beat. Yeah.
And if you're above your pay grade as far as skills go, I think it's really important to be humble enough to know that you can just walk your bike in certain places.
Yep. Oh yeah. I think a lot of people could avert some disaster by that advice.
Well, Lars, I really appreciate you jumping on this. This is a thing where I essentially just sent you a message. We didn't know each other before hopping on here. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about Sedona, how it came to be, and as far as a mountain bike community, because it is a really iconic mountain bike community that a lot of people hold it in the same way they do Moab and other places out west. And so I just appreciate you being able to kind of pull back the curtain on how some of this came to be and highlight what a special place it really is. So thank you very much.
Well, Josh, thank you for having me on. And it's exciting to be able to share that information with people. Hopefully it does inspire people. And hopefully people, if they haven't heard about Sedona, are stoked and want to come check it out. And we still have like 30 miles of trail to build in Turkey Creek still. So that's actually where I'm going once we get done here.
Nice. So yeah, more reasons to go to Arizona, and I'm going to say the shoulder seasons for a lot of the country.
Yep.
Your build season.
I've noticed, I've been researching because of the festival's weather woes, like the the first 2 weeks of February are consistently really good.
Yeah, which is probably strange, right? To look at that.
Yeah.
I mean, we were there in, like I said, mid-January. And I'll tell you what, man, I was super happy to be there because where I live, school was shut down because temperatures were not above zero.
Yeah.
And so to get out of La Crosse during that time frame was pretty incredible. And I've been fortunate to travel to southern states a handful of times this winter for work-related stuff. And I've pretty much timed it to where every time I went below zero, I was somewhere else.
Yeah, so it's a win.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate the fact that you just highlighted the fact that there's still future stuff to come for Sedona. And I think there's just so much to ride there as it is. You can spend a couple weeks there and probably not hit everything.
Yep. And there's even more coming. So yeah.
Maybe we'll have to do a follow-up and, once more of this stuff comes online and still continue to highlight the relationship with the U.S. Forest Service and how those things come to be. So,
yeah. Cool.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you have heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect podcast. Also, don't forget to check out Cooley Creative at www.dudejustsendit.com. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain Apparel, Worldwide Cyclery, and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.